The year was 2000 AD, and on the western edge of the North York Moors, a steep promontory known as Roulston Scar was about to spit out a monumental secret.
We were shocked to discover such an enormous complex.
A chance find revealed that Roulston Scar was home to northern England's largest hill fort, dating to around 400 BC. The scale of it was staggering, over twice the size of most northern English hill forts. While finding such a massive fort was a surprise, it turns out that its northern rampart was known about in the 1800s and mentioned as a hill fort in a 1960s guide. It was even partially excavated in 1969. But all these glimpsed finds failed to recognise the site's true scale. Importantly, it was a giant defensive site sat slap bang in the centre of the land of Britain's largest Celtic tribe, the Brigantes. The Brigantes, as they've come to be known, were a Celtic confederation who ruled what is now known as Northern England. They were a confederation of smaller tribes and one big tribal heartland here in Stannick. The Brigantes were a formidable presence, controlling a vast swathe of Iron Age England, from the Irish Sea to the North Sea, and denoted by Roman historians as the most populous group in the province. Their name possibly meaning Highlanders or the Elevated Ones. The Brigantes' main power centre, the Stanwick or Stannick earthworks, only 30 kilometres from Roulston Scar, are the largest in Britain, and seem to have been built to defend against something really big. This right here is the bank of the Scots Dyke, which runs all the way up to the Stannick earthworks, the capital of the Brigantes tribe. Look how big this is. It's huge! The Romans clearly viewed the Brigantes as a threat, with some historians suggesting that Hadrian's Wall itself was partly a response to the fierce rebellion led by the Brigantian king Venutius. Now, the connection between all this information is interesting, if a little bit complicated, but when you look at a map, the plot really flips on its head. And that's because joined to Roulston Scar is the tail end of an older and far more enigmatic structure, an immense earthwork, potentially thousands of years older than the fort itself. Do you see that over there? That is the hill fort, and I'm stood next to the other end of the dike. Can you believe it? It's just absolutely stunning. Hello everybody. You meet me up here in the North York Moors, right on the edge of, and I'm standing on the Cleave Dyke System, believe it or not. Now, you see this? This right here is crop. And just perusing over it with your bare eyes, can you see there are lighter patches and darker patches? I've got a worm on my arm. You see that? Anyway, it might not seem that interesting to many of you to just look at a blank field. But believe it or not, this is the bread and butter of aerial archaeology. And it's because of crops like this that we know about the Cleave Dyke System. The Cleave Dyke System is an 11-kilometre long network of mounds and ditches stretching along the edge of the Hambleton Hills. In its current state, most of the site only exists as crop marks, and where it does survive, the banks are weathered, making them about as tall as me, a perfect 6 foot. There are some notable breaks along its course, including a half-mile gap near Boltby Scar, where a small Iron Age fort sits. We know that parts of the site, like this and Roulston Scar, are Iron Age, but a weird aspect of the Cleave Dyke System is the inclusion of far earlier burial mounds along its length. Most of these burial mounds appear to date to the early Bronze Age, making them at least 2,000 years older than the hill forts. And remarkably, most of them align with the dike. Some of these Bronze Age barrows were built close to even older Neolithic burial mounds, and contained artefacts directly related to activity at Stonehenge, which, stay tuned for, I will get onto. Although the dike is one connected entity, it does comprise many individually named surviving earthworks. Some of these branch off as annexes, but they also follow burial mounds. Examples include the Caston Dyke to the south, the Steeplechase to the north, and the Hesketh Dyke near the middle. Hesketh, by the way, comes from the Viking word for horse, which may indicate that the Vikings interpreted the dike as an old horse track. The naming of the dike isn't the only confusing part. The archaeology of the site itself is It's completely muddled, and believe it or not, there has never been a comprehensive study of it that pulls everything together. So, for the first time, let's pore over the Cleave Dyke system, pulling back the layers from the Iron Age all the way back to the Stone Age. Now, when I do this, I want you all to listen, and then write a comment down below to let me know what on earth you think this thing was. Oh, and if you do like the video, please do leave a like. The Iron Age, 400 BC to 43 AD. During the Iron Age, people obviously built defensive forts along the existing dike system. We already detailed Roulston Scar, but there's also Boltby Scar, a little promontory fort where a single dike and wall seals off the hillside. Weirdly, this fort also encloses a few Bronze Age burial mounds. These earlier burial features are extremely interesting, as evidenced by the discovery of these golden hair loops, dating to around 2400 to 2200 BC, found beneath the fort's rampart. These directly parallel these loops from Alston in the Pennines, and those that were buried with the Amesbury Archer at Stonehenge. I've yet to see anybody mention this connection when talking about the Amesbury Archer, which has just completely blindsided me and made me wish I wrote about this in my book. It is probable that the Cleave Dyke system was only repurposed during the Iron Age, with the addition of these defensive outposts, as Iron Age pottery shards were found in some of the earlier burial mounds, showing obvious evidence of reuse, which gets us on to the Bronze Age, 2500 to 700 BC. The Cleave Dyke system itself has been suggested to date back to the mid-Bronze Age, between 1800 and 700 BC, the period when hillforts first emerged in Britain. However, there is a bit of a spanner in this theory, as the stones of a nearby early Bronze Age barrow, known as the limestone slab barrow, likely came from the Dyke's ditch. Wow. So that implies an origin sometime before 2000 BC. Now, this uncertainty extends all the way to its function. Though it might appear a westward defensive wall for the eastern hillside, such a defence would be quite pointless, especially since you can't even see the dyke from the bottom of the hill. It is seemingly pointless. Therefore, another interpretation is that the dyke wasn't defensive at all, but rather enclosed earlier burial mounds, forming a massive necropolis, as most mounds lie between the steep cliff face and the dyke. Adding to this picture, a stone-lined grave was found in 1937 on the road leading up to Roulston Scar. This kist contained the skeleton of a young woman, alongside pieces of a food vessel, a jet bead, bronze studs, and 4 burnt stones. Interestingly, this burial did not have a mound, but it still lined up with the Cleave Dyke system. In a manner typical of the early Bronze Age, these mounds are located along the cliff side, but they also span off to the east, which, surprisingly again, are followed by the dyke as annexes, which is really weird. An early Bronze Age barrow at Silver Hill, for instance, sits back from the cliff edge, and was found to contain a single skeleton and a bone ring, typical of the early Bronze Age. And another barrow, which sits just southeast of Boltby Scar, revealed what's known as a beaker burial from around 2500 BC, right at the very start of the Bronze Age. This included the body of a teenage girl, accompanied by an inverted beaker, stone tools, and a quartz pebble. And to top it all off, there is the freaky limestone slab barrow, which I unknowingly stood on to get this shot. It produced a very weird assortment of artefacts, including 3 beakers, an urn, pottery from several different periods, including the Iron Age and Roman periods, alongside 9 disembodied skulls. What? The Neolithic, 4000 to 2500 BC. Here in the northern arm of the Cleave Dyke system, this just runs straight down into a natural gully, a dry stream. Now, some people think because these earthworks here are so neat and tidy and well preserved that they might actually be medieval additions to the already existing Iron Age dike system. However, I'm about to show you something that throws a complete spanner in the works. Now, I can't believe this is the first time one of these is showing up on camera on my channel, but that is a long barrow. And it's not just any long barrow. This is Greenwell's long barrow, also known as Kepwick long barrow, but I prefer Greenwell's long barrow. It gives it a bit more personality. There's a very famous antiquarian called William Greenwell came here, and he dug into this. I don't know if you can see that big trench right there. And he found the remains of 5 people from the early Neolithic, so that's 4000 to 3200 BC, in this. Now, the interesting thing about this mound, which runs this way, it's about 31 metres long, is it aligns almost perfectly to the dike system. Now, make sense of that. We've got a Bronze Age or Iron Age dike system. There's a barrow over there, just like the rest of the run of the dike. And it aligns to an early Neolithic feature. We start to get this picture of prehistoric boundaries just lasting for thousands and thousands of years.